Following that very pungent argument is Peter Conradi, who's a journalist and author, and I first met him when he was the Brussels correspondent of the Sunday Times. He went on great acclaim to report on the collapse of the Soviet Union, nothing to do with Peter, I think. And has been appointed editor of the Sunday Times Focus section. But he's also written several books, including The King's Speech, How One Man Saved the British Monarchy, which was looked at the events behind the famous film, and his latest book, published this week, is The Great Survivors, How Monarchy Made It to the 21st Century. Will it make it to the 22nd?
I'd have to tear up.
Sorry.
Throw me completely. Okay, it's difficult to start last out of four, because there have been so many things that Joan said and that Graham said which I disagree with. However, let me just weave in my response to them skillfully into what I thought I was going to say before I came. Cast our minds back to the early 1990s. We just mentioned the break of the Soviet Union. By coincidence, a few years after that, Estonia, which had just broken away from Soviet domination, or rather a party within Estonia, a royalist party within Estonia, sent out a quite strange invitation. Now, they sent this invitation to Prince Edward. Yeah, that's our Prince Edward. And they sent an invitation saying, "Dear Prince Edward, would you come and be our king? Your background," they backed it up, saying, "your background as an actor and television producer would be ideal to create the majesty a new king would require to combine ancient culture with modern political reality." Now, they'd obviously never seen him on stage, and they'd probably never seen any of the films he made either. So, this was a minority party, it was a bit of a gimmick, they had 10% of the vote, and the offer remained just that. Now, to us, that just sounds absolutely ridiculous. And it's quite easy to forget that 100 years ago, just over 100 years ago, in 1905, when Norway broke away from Sweden, they did precisely that. They invited a prince, sort of a spare, as it were, like Edward, from Denmark, brought him over, made him their king. Belgium did that when it was founded in 1831. The Swedes did that in the early 19th century when their king was going a bit gaga, and they just imported a French marshal. Now, interestingly, these dynasties are still there. We tend to think of monarchy. This debate's always couched in terms of the British monarchy as if we're some kind of weird country that does something that no one else does. But I think just in the same way that we in Britain are not terribly interested in European popular music or pop music, probably even less so after the Eurovision contest, we don't sort of think much about other other monarchies. So anyway, those dynasties are still there. Our own Windsors, as they've been rebranded since 1970, are also still there. So it's a system which is, rather than being a system which is on a long-term decline, it seems to be a system that is enduring. Now, it's difficult to defend a system based on hereditary privilege, especially in front of an audience as militantly Republican as I believe a majority of you are. And so therefore, I hope you'll feel sympathetic towards me if I say that if I was setting out to devise a system from scratch, if for example, if I was Scottish and Scotland were to break away from the United Kingdom, I certainly wouldn't propose that it should be a monarchy. Now, on the other hand, there are many other features of our current society that if I were creating a society from scratch, I wouldn't propose having those either. And, some of those you would agree with, some of those you wouldn't agree with, because we've all got different opinions. The important thing is, we're not starting from scratch, we're starting from where we are now. I mean, it's a little bit like that absurd joke of, how do I get to such and such a place when you should be starting out from where you are here. Well, we are starting out from here. So, in a sense, we've got to compare a Republican future with a monarchist present. And that means working out how we should change the system and why we should change the system. So, I would say quite simply, the main argument in favour of the system is that it actually works quite well. In the monarch, now there's a confusion which I noticed that both Joan and Graham made, which is this confusion between the institution of monarchy and the royal family. So I'm not talking about the royal family, I'm not talking about Charles, I'm talking about or Elizabeth or William. I'm talking about the institution of monarchy. monarchy as it's set up within the unwritten British Constitution. And I would say that in the monarchy, we have a system which works, which functions. We have a figure who somehow floats above the political system, who has representational functions both here and abroad, who in a sense symbolises the country at times of crisis, can be seen as a unifying force. Thankfully, we haven't had that many crises during this current Queen's reign. And most of all, is non-partisan. And if I may also add on a slightly trivial note, and maybe I'll just say this as a journalist, the monarchy provides endless work for journalists, for magazines, for tour guides, for the tourist industry. I'm always wary of any attempts to sort of put a monetary value on monarchy, and I know there'll be endless debates, I'm sure Graham will mention it, about how Legoland is a bigger attraction than Windsor Castle or something. Even so, I mean, there's a latest report, take it or leave it, which came out at the weekend by some company called Brand Finance, which estimated that the monarchy is reckoned to be worth 26.4 billion quid in terms of the economic benefits it brings to the UK through the boost of tourism and other industries. I don't know whether to believe that or not, you don't know whether to believe that or not. Quite important, though, I suppose, is that it is just popular as an institution. Again, we get back to these opinion polls. The ones I'm talking about are the ones that say, do you support the current system? We're not talking about loving the Queen or not loving the Queen. That's an irrelevance. We're talking about, do you support the institution of monarchy? If you look back over the past 2 decades or so, you will find there's a bit of an oscillation, but support for the monarchy tends to vary between about 69 and 72%. Support for the Republican cause, by contrast, on the basis of those same polls, seems to vary between about 15 and 22%. I was very interested, a couple of years ago I went along to the annual conference of the Republic in order to research this fine book, which is available after the talk. I was told that it was an organisation with about 1,500 members at the time, and I'm sure it's grown enormously since. I was a little disappointed because when I went there I found an audience of about 100 people, mostly male, mostly middle class, mostly white, and I was quite gratified to see over 50, so I felt I was at a young age. So this didn't seem to me particularly like a mass movement. In fact, I suspect of that 100, probably a substantial proportion of you are here today. And this again is not just a British oddness. In research of the aforementioned book, I went around to Europe's other 6 monarchies. Graham mentioned the problems that the Swedish and the Spanish kings find themselves in at the moment, which usually due largely to their sexual incontinence, I suppose we could call it. But even there, the Republican movements, like your own, I'm addressing myself to the overwhelming majority of people who are in the Republican movement here, in the audience, like their own, are struggling. They've got the same kind of poll ratings as Graham's organisation has here. I feel quite sorry for them. I went to Denmark to meet them, I went to Sweden to meet them, all very well-meaning, mostly young people, which I suppose is a good sign for the future, but getting absolutely nowhere. So, okay, we have an institution that appears to enjoy rather large popular support, considerably more, I would say, than any politician ever gets. Let's contrast that with the alternatives. Look at Germany. We have a president there, obviously. Last 2 presidents, and I defy anyone in the audience to name the 2 previous presidents of the current one in Germany, both of them had to resign early, before their terms were up, because of various scandals. Look at how the presidential system works perfectly in Italy, where you get a succession of former party hacks who hold the post, and who are frequently run into a problem of being accused of trying to exert political influence, because they're former politicians. What do you expect them to do? So, would a president actually fulfill the role of the monarch any better than the monarch does? Well, the first question we've got to ask ourselves, if we're approaching it from a sort of constitutional point of view, is what kind of a president would we have? Now, we could have an executive president, like the American president, like the French president, who would actually wield political power. I mean, that perhaps would be the most logical thing to do. However, that would also mean completely system. We'd have to move it from a parliamentary system to a presidential system. You know, we'd have to completely rewrite the unwritten, if you want to do that, the British Constitution. You know, would we want to concentrate all that kind of power in one person? Certainly not. So then, I'm going to start to speak a little bit more quickly now. The result then is that we've got to have a non-executive president, presumably, but then how are we going to choose one? Let's have a directly elected non-executive president. But then if that person is directly elected, they will be seen to have some kind of political mandate, they will be tempted to speak out. If they speak out, what kind of clash do we have potentially between them and the politicians? Okay, let's not have a directly elected one. Let's have one who is elected through a kind of backroom deal by various politicians, or maybe done on a sort of rotating basis. You scratch mine, I scratch yours. Do we have John Bercow as president? If that would be improvement on the monarchy, let's all vote for that. Thank you very much.
I just want Graham to respond because he wanted to. I believe it's about.
As you know, the Republic has grown enormously over the last few years, and the average age of our 14 is around 30, 33 maybe. We have enormous numbers of young people who are very diverse. I wouldn't base your argument against a Republic on the fact that we went to war meeting a few years ago and the average age was 50.
Well, I went to an annual general.